of irritation at the way someone was blowing their nose. How is this possible? It can't really have been very deep calm, can it? Well, actually it can. It can have been deep calm, but what wasn't deep enough was loving kindness and compassion. So it's we know that the calm meditation is a very important aspect, but it isn't enough on its own. So for the one who's asking this, start and finish each meditation with loving kindness and compassion for yourself and the people around you, and as many people as you like to include, but particularly, of course, those who are having a cold. What's the difference between feelings and emotions? And thank you very much for the tools you've given. They're of great benefit to me, and doing them makes me happy. The difference between feeling and emotion. Feeling is sort of like the overall category, and emotion is that what is more on the mental side, and then we have sensation, which is on the physical side. So if we want to be very exact in our concepts, and it does help to do that, the feeling is both sensation and emotion, and then we distinguish between the physical sensation and the mental emotion. But of course, when speaking and talking about it, it very often happens, and I've noticed that to happen to me, that I'm using feeling and emotion alternatively. And so again, actually and exactly it should be said, it's an emotion or it's a sensation, and both are feelings. But doesn't always happen that way. This morning you talked about the impermanence of all that exists. Where does that niggling feeling come from that causes a search for nibbana or freedom, latent or explicit, in all that exists? Oh, well, I'm not sure that there is a niggling feeling that causes a search for nibbana in all that exists. Is that feeling supposed to be in everything that exists? Or nibbana? Let's put the sentence differently. Where does that niggling feeling come from that causes a search for nibbana or freedom, which is latent or explicit? It comes from dissatisfaction. And that dissatisfaction is not permanent, is it? You're not constantly dissatisfied, only now and then. Maybe mornings and evenings or something like that. Isn't there a force at work which can be called permanent? Well, everything that exists is moving. There isn't anything that doesn't have the characteristic of the particle that comes together and falls apart, no matter what force or whatever you like to call it. However, if you want to find something that is permanent, but which no person, as long as they think of themselves as a person, can experience, you can call it either nibbana, you can call it the Godhead, you can call it anything you want, but you can't experience it as long as you're there. Not physically, emotionally there. In the Buddha's words, there is the deed, but no doer. There is suffering, but no sufferer. There is the path, but no one to enter it. There is nibbana, but no one to attain it. And yet he spent 45 years teaching how to get to nibbana. A lovely Zen paradox, isn't it? the crucifixion of Jesus and the I have to translate, sorry, and the salvation or the liberation from all sin because of his death, what is that in Buddhist view? Well, the being released from all sin, it has very much similarity to the Bodhisattva ideal. The Bodhisattva ideal, which has within it the practice, which in Tibetan Buddhism is called Tonglen, taking all the unhappiness of people, all their sorrows, into your own heart and dissolving them. Whether any one single person can do it, the kind of persons we are, is questionable. But a great person, a great master, can do far more than we can. How should one act when doubts come up? Strong doubts. Should one contemplate directly on this subject, or should one be even extremely mindful so that the doubts disappear because one is in the very moment? If one can do the latter, that would be great. If one can be in the moment with the breath or with the walking or with whatever is happening and thereby drop whatever it is that's disturbing, that would be excellent. Most people can't do that. Most people, when they have doubts, they have to work with the doubt. The opposite of doubt is trust, and trust and confidence are love. So one of the good ways of substituting with the opposite is to have a loving kindness meditation right then and there, at that particular moment, for oneself, for what one is doing, for the people around one, for whatever it is that one can think of at that time. It will be easier than just to drop it. But if one can drop it, by all means. How does daily meditation practice strengthen the mind? Do the thoughts, samskaras, the thoughts in other words, gradually grow weaker? Or does present moment consciousness get stronger? Or is this not definable or explainable? Everything the Buddha taught is definable and explainable. We have in our tradition 5 mudras, hand movements of the Buddha. And one of those hand movements that we can see in many of the statues is the left hand open with the palm outward. And that means no secrets. Everything open. The Buddha said about himself, I've never taught with a closed fist. I've always taught with an open hand. Everything he taught is definable and explainable. He was the most pragmatic of teachers. How does the meditation practice strengthen the mind? Well, by doing it. But I think the question is, why does it strengthen the mind? The thoughts, do they grow weaker? I wouldn't think so, on the contrary. But the thinking which is distracting, that eventually disappears because one has learned to stay put. You can look upon it as, well, the Buddha compared it to an axe which has been sharpened. If you have a blunt axe, it's very difficult to cut wood. Now, in this day and age, very few people do, but I'm sure you have enough imagination to think that that must be so. You can also think of a pencil. If it's blunt, it still writes, but when you sharpen it, it's a totally different story. That's what happens to the mind. If it can't stay put in one place, it's still blunt. When it learns to stay put, it is sharpened. And as it's sharpened, it has a strength to cut through the illusion. Today I try to investigate the impermanence of my thoughts. They came and vanished, and sometimes arose a stronger one that seemed to be me. Question about whether it's really me. All those thoughts denied that. No one I could really keep in mind, not one I could really keep in mind for a longer time. Then the question arose, who is investigating the thoughts? That also denied to be me. It was the observer, but didn't want to be me. In fact, no one was there except the exclamation, "That's me or mine," was the expression. So the owner is a craving for being, an underlined, strong feeling inside, the one I used to call me. I want to be here, be someone special, a good contemplating mind, for instance. Is it right that me is nothing but craving for being? And if so, how can I use it? It's absolutely correct. Craving for being does create that illusion. How to use it? Well, give up craving for being, huh? But that's not so easily done. I think one of the best ways of investigating this further is to see the problems that one gets into every time that the me is especially strong. It doesn't just crave to be, it craves to be someone. It craves to be something. It craves to be better than others, no more than others, be important, have success, get results, all sorts of things. And it also clings to the past and the future. So when we can recognize all those facets which arise out of that craving for being, we can see that every single one of them is dukkha. And then there comes that very strong urge, samvega in Pali, the urgency, to really practice steadily meditation, purification, and the real insight into the fact that with the impermanence that was noticed here of the thoughts which kept coming and going, there is no solidity, there is transparency. And when we can see that there is transparency and no solidity, it becomes easier and easier to give up our clinging to the one we think we are. The opposite of nibbana is clinging. So what we can investigate is, what am I clinging to? But it is quite rightly seen here in this question, the craving for being, that's what we're clinging to. Everybody has it, from the smallest ant and mosquito and fly to the biggest elephant. Everybody wants to be. Nobody wants to be killed. So that doesn't mean that we need to be killed in order to see this. It just means that we can actually, eventually, give up and give in. And when we give up and we give in, then some of this loosens up, slowly, slowly. A recent experiment with atomic particles demonstrated that they most frequently emerged at the holes which were being watched, at a level far beyond chance. Could this be another result of our yearning and craving? Not as far as I know. As far as I know, in physics, in quantum physics, one has found out that the observer is the participant I have already mentioned that, but that's quantum physics. And since the observer that's observing at these holes is the participant, then whatever happens where the observer is standing because he's participating. And that's actually what's happening there. Is nothing real? Not the trees, the animals, the birds, the earth? Are they all the product of our craving? And if they are, do they disappear when we truly recognize the nothingness of the universe? God forbid. We wouldn't be able to breathe. No. This is a not uncommon misconception. Very often, particularly happens when people hear the word Maya, which is used in Hinduism, about illusion. Everything's illusion, nothing's real. The Buddha doesn't say that. He doesn't say nothing is real. He says there are two kinds of reality. There's relative and there's absolute. Now, in relative reality, each tree stands on its own. Each person sits on a separate pillow. Each one looks different. Everybody is important in their own right. And everybody likes to be happy. And there's a me, and there's a you, and there's a us, and there's a them. There's yesterday and tomorrow, and there's a whole world of duality. That's relative reality. It's quite true. I mean, all you have to do is open your eyes, look around, and then you see all these different people. So, can't be untrue. Now, an enlightened one, if he came in here, he'd also see all these different people. There's no question about it. What else would he be doing? But what is not real is our imagination, our thought system, our ideas that there is a solid entity to be found. That's not real. But that there's a person sitting there, sure. That there's a tree and a bird and a pigeon and church bells, how can that not be real? But there's no solid entity, identity in any of that. So we nothing disappears. Our viewpoint disappears. Our opinion disappears. And our feeling that I am different and special and separated, that disappears. This may be naive, concrete thinking. I seem to be missing a few parts, perhaps most of this puzzle. What did the Buddha say about no-thingness? It's spelled like with little dashes in between. What are duality and non-duality, and are they connected to nothingness? Oh, I think I've already answered that. The duality is our relative reality in which we live, and in which we have to make a living, in which we have to do the necessary things to support this body, and in which we meet each other. But non-duality arises when we can see that there are actually absolutely no boundaries. Nothing is bound by anything. It's all flowing into each other. We will do another contemplation tomorrow, which may help to actualize that a little more than just words. We'll do the contemplation on the four elements. I think the mind continues to live even after the body is dead. Does the mind ever die? Well, it's quite true that the mind is not, the personal mind does not die if we believe ourselves to be a person. And because of that craving to be, there's rebirth. Craving to be. But if there's no craving to be, and if the reality of no personal mind has been seen, then personal mind no longer exists after death. In fact, it disappears already at enlightenment before death. And it is nothing but universal mind, even though it may sit in a personal body. That's a bit difficult, never mind. Next course. What is mind? What is consciousness? What's the difference between the two? There are different parts to this question, so I think I'll answer each part separately so I don't have to reread it then. The mind consists of 4 bits, 4 parts, has 4 constituents. They're called the 4 aggregates, in Pali the khandhas. And they are the sense consciousness, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, and then feeling, which is a result of sense contact, then perception, which is labeling, and then our reaction to all that, which are our thoughts. So we have 4 parts of mind, and consciousness in this connection means sense consciousness. But the word in Pali, vijnana, and the word consciousness has other connotations. It also has the connotation of the difference between being unconscious and conscious. And it also has a connotation of higher levels of consciousness and lower levels of consciousness. All that is also part of mind. But when we describe mind, we use sense consciousness. If there's no I, who has respect for Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha? The one who feels it. Anyone who feels it has respect. And if I feel to be a me, then it's a me. And if I don't feel to be a me, then it's respect. Who becomes master of the mind, or what becomes master of the mind? The mind. The question would never be answered by the Buddha because the question is wrongly put. There's no who. Mastering the mind is effort. Effort. Just effort. Thoughts are just coming and going. And the mind is distracted. Who wants to be distracted? Nobody. Isn't that right? Does anybody want to be distracted? Or is everybody just distracted? I mean, just look at it for a moment. Who wants to be distracted? Nobody. And who is distracted? Everybody. So, who masters the mind? Put it around the other way and you'll see it's an absurdity. It doesn't work. It's just lack of training, that's all. It's just a matter of time. How do I know, or how can I recognize what all this chatter, which of the chatter in the mind I should take seriously and believe? Well, how about trying to take none of it seriously? And then we don't have to discriminate. Just nothing, none of it. And then just try to concentrate. And then let it chatter again and say to the mind, chatter, chatter, come back. And don't take anything seriously. Well, that would work for meditation, doesn't it? In daily life, you take seriously everything that's loving, compassionate, and helpful. That one can take seriously. I've met some ordained American Zen women teacher and have read about a number of Vajrayana non-American teachers. In Lenore Friedman's book, Meeting with Remarkable Women, about Buddhist teachers, there are lay teachers of Vipassana, and I believe you are the only one that's a Theravada nun. I know you led a nunnery in Sri Lanka for Western women, so there must be some others. No, not necessarily. Western women are not necessarily Western nuns. Parapudur Nuns Island, I established that in Sri Lanka for laywomen that wanted to practice for a longer period, and of course for those who wanted to be ordained. There were only 2 Western women ordained there, and 1 Sri Lankan, and the others were all there just for 3 months, 6 months, a year, year and a half. So I wasn't a great rush to become a nun. Why do you think that there are so few Americans or Western Theravada nuns teaching this path as compared to other Buddhist disciplines? Well, as far as I know, there aren't all that many nuns, Western or American, teaching any of these paths. Some, yes. And there are a number, I'm not sure about the number, but there are possibly 10 or so, Theravada nuns, Western ones, at Amaravati in England. And there are 2 living in Sri Lanka. There's, they don't all come to mind now, but the most of them are in England. And there aren't that many women teachers around at all. That's why Lenore had a hard time getting that book together. Is it beneficial to fast, particularly during retreats? It's very beneficial to fast, but one should only do it during a retreat if one is an experienced person in fasting and knows one's body well enough to know exactly what to do. Otherwise, one should not burden the mind also with the body. The mind has enough to do trying to concentrate. So it is very beneficial to fast, yes. It is a renunciation, part of renunciation. And as I explained this morning, we are on the pathway of renouncing the strong egocentricity. And anything that helps us to renounce anything will be helpful. But in a retreat, only if one is very experienced with that, and not burden the mind unnecessarily. When I do, part by part, my mind strains to feel sensation where there doesn't seem to be any. Also, in breathing meditation, my mind strains to follow the breath, which wreaks havoc with its natural flow. And yet, when I relax off my mind, I easily find myself distracted and chattering. How to remedy this? How to develop receptivity and ease of the mind without losing its acuteness? Well, it's actually strictly a matter of practice. But straining is a result of result thinking. I want to achieve something. I want to get something. That has to be dropped, because it will not work at all. There is nothing to achieve, there's nothing to get, there's everything to let go of. I told you already the key word for the spiritual path is letting go. So straining to do something will be extremely detrimental to any meditation practice. In fact, it produces usually a headache. And it might even produce a very backache and a headache. And by the time one has done that for 3 days, one decides this is not for me. It's straining is trying to get. Spiritual life, meditation, is trying to get let go. Whatever it is that's in the mind, let go. It doesn't matter what it is, just let it go. And go with the flow. Just let it flow. Breath flows, sensation flow, mind flows with it. Just be with it. There's nothing to do. Just being there is really the most important thing. I have often music in my mind. This isn't really unwholesome, is it? So why should I try to substitute it? Well, it depends when it's happening. In daily life, there's nothing unwholesome about having music in the mind. Nothing at all. It's much better than having hate or greed. Much preferable. But then if you want to meditate, well, then of course I would try to substitute it. I wouldn't try to keep it. But on the other hand, I have also come across a very rare cases, but some, where it was possible to use that music, which is not actually sound, but just in the mind, to become so concentrated that a person was able to go into the meditative absorption, because that was the thing that really interested that person. We're a musician, of course. So in daily life, no. Let it be. It's better than being concerned with the things that one wants or wants to get rid of. In the meditation, if it can be used, use it. Otherwise, substitute with a meditation subject. Today I had an experience which leads me to believe it is possible to enter the jhanas through insight meditation. I was contemplating your statement, there is suffering but no sufferer. After some time my legs became painful, but instead of moving them, I realized that my desire to move my legs was actually a form of craving. And therefore, if I did not crave to move my legs, then the suffering should not exist. Since craving is the cause of suffering, by keeping the mind on the experience and the thought there is suffering but no sufferer, it disappeared and did not recur. At the time I felt a definite aha. It's quite true. It's totally true. It's a very true insight. There's only one cause for our dukkha, and that's wanting, wishing. Particularly what we are all on about constantly is wanting things to be different from the way they are. Somebody sneezes, we don't want them to sneeze, or coughing. Our legs hurt, we don't want it to hurt. It's cold, we don't want it to be cold. It's hot, we don't want it to be hot. Whatever it is, we would like it the way we think it ought to be. But we can't arrange the universe with the way we think it ought to be. There are 6 billion of us. We would have to have 6 billion separate universes, which we probably do have. And each one has to be the owner of the universe in order to arrange it properly. And that just is totally absurd. But we're still trying to do that. So this is a very true and a very important experience, because it's so exactly what we're experiencing all the time. If something has an unpleasant feeling to it, we want to get away from it. If it has a pleasant feeling, we want to keep it. So here, letting go of the craving, we let go of the dukkha. Things are the way they are. And so that was exactly the right way of handling it, and the suffering disappeared not because the leg all of a sudden became something different. The mind became different. The mind didn't want to change things anymore. It was okay the way it was. So that was an aha experience, and therefore a very strong insight. And the strong insights are always connected with either anicca, dukkha, or anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, this one was dukkha, or the corelessness. in the beginning it said that it was possible to enter the jhanas through insight, and I presume that the person who's writing this then afterwards did a calm meditation. It doesn't say so, but I presume that that's the way it was. And here is something to remind us, and it's a very nice reminder. Today is the 60th birthday of the Dalai Lama. And maybe we can send thoughts of peace, love, and joy for him and his people in Tibet and in exile. So we can do that in the loving kindness meditation. We can wish him a happy birthday, and which I'm sure he'll be very happy to receive. And we can wish that the situation in Tibet evens itself out, so that there's no so much human suffering there, and at the same time send all our thoughts of love to him and to his people. And stand up and stretch our legs.